While folks are joining, has anybody got any thoughts you want to share or questions?
I've got a question.
Ah,
In regards to, we were speaking of Naheen that one time. That was the unmarked piece, I believe, for the
mhm.
bone game.
Oh yeah.
Hmm. There was that other word that they referred to the marked piece, and I've talked to Smitty trying to understand what that, because he knew what Naheen meant,
Hmm.
but it had nothing to do with the game, the explanation he gave me. Nagan is one that I read it sounds like Nagan the way they spell it, but I probably am not saying the right word for it. Do you know what they might be referring to?
Okay, let's take a look at some gambling stuff. So I'm going to show you folks a very useful list of words that we have thanks to Jeff Lear. So let me find it.
Is this another one that I totally missed when I was looking through the list?
No, it's a huge, huge list, right? So we got to
Okay.
find. And so I don't know if you guys can see the find window, but when I
Yeah.
open the sort of find window, I'm just going to enter gambling and see what comes up. And then we'll go through. And so here's rattling wood pieces.
My name comes up.
Oh, okay. So the rattling, oh yeah, that's right, chance, right? So the rattling of sticks. So we have Xíxchʼ. So that's and then sometimes we'll get an explanation over here. So this is probably having to do with, it might be a type of game. Yeah, so one thing we could do is we could look in here, and then we can also look in De Laguna and see what she has. Because for the most part, stick gambling kind of vanished from the coast, but they still do it a lot in Teslin, and also folks in Carcross too. And then we'll keep going through. So here's Naheen, and then there's another, looks like a word from perhaps Chinook jargon, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Shahash,
Oh,
we
yeah.
see it in there, or Shaha. So Naheen kat ashqa is an example given here for stick gambling.
Mm.
And then we see, so here, Mildred Sparks, and usually there's notes about who he was conferring with. So Naheen or Naheen. So Naheen is probably, and what we were getting out of Teslin is that's the name for the act of stick gambling itself. That's what I understood anyways.
Yeah, I seen that they had as one of them, but I know that was the old game with the 50 sticks that had the knock.
Well, ashqa is just gambling. So
Is it?
it could be bingo, that could be playing, it could also be playing cards. So
Okay.
ashqa is, it's almost like I think of it as like, almost like if you say, this is a duck, and then there's all these other kinds of ducks, right?
I see.
So we also have naq listed as a gambling stick.
Mm-hmm.
And then naqan is a carved
That's it.
N-A underline G-A-N.
Oh man.
So there was a game, so and there's several different games. There's one where you're trying to hide just one thing, and they
Mm-hmm.
gotta pick which hand it's in, and usually it's under a blanket, and there's singing and lots of other stuff that goes on, but folks really, and they really know how to play that one. And then there was ones where like there were unmarked sticks and then a marked one that had sort of a design on it, and you had to figure out which one that one is. And so here's, so again, just like doing a search, and so we'll keep going through and see. So we get to Naheen again. So we'll skip through those. Xíxchʼ is the lucky gambling stick. So this one comes from Swanton. And so Yées is sometimes a stick gambling game as well. And so I'm sure there was a whole bunch of these different ones, and people
Mm-hmm.
just knew which one,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna play. Xíxchʼ, gambling. So here's the game of chance right here, Xíxchʼ. So there you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know what this word is. Anybody know what that one is?
I don't know what that one is.
Yes.
Mm,
So this was some kind of stick tossing gambling game.
hmm,
Xíxchʼ. And then I know there's a verb, a tuk, which is shooting an arrow, but then it's
mhm,
also choosing a gambling stick or pointing where it might be.
mhm.
So then we get ashqa. Uh,
Oh, so Xíxchʼ, I wonder if that's the one. I know there was one in particular I seen referenced many times for that one where you hide within the shredded um, cedar,
uh-huh.
and then it's that knot one with the knock.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then qaqaq is the name of the gambling stick that you would throw. And so, yeah, this would be fun to sort of
Break
take,
it down.
you know, take this vocabulary to the stick gambling competitions when they start back up and just sort of watch the games people are doing and try and figure. And then we can certainly look more into Jeff's notes because you could look up to ashqa as a verb. And so we can start looking up the verbs as well. So there is another, so I want to show you folks, I think I've shown you before where to find that document. But you could just download it, right? So you can have it and you can have it on your thing. So you're able to look stuff up if you can't find it in the dictionaries. The dictionaries are nice because they're kind of published and organized, and these are just big lists of things. Well, I'll show you another big list and I'll show you where to find this stuff. So the other thing, so this is a database that's been assembled, or a spreadsheet, sorry. And then, let me find one more thing here. So there's another scanned document, which was really Jeff Lear's handwritten notes. And so he just wrote down just a whole mess of verbs, like a whole bunch of verbs, right? And so this is what it looks like. It's like one of these yellow tabs, like, and, like a tablet. And then they're numbered here, like 215, 216. And those numbers don't really correspond to what page number you're actually on in here. So it's a little confusing. But the nice thing is that you do have this index on the side. So these are organized by verb root. So we could go down and we might find ka. So there it is, to gamble. So ashqa is gambling. And so this is how we use this one, but it's not searchable. However, Yées so sometimes I have students who, when we come around to the springtime, and I really give them the talking to about not taking the summer off, because then you kind of got to start over with a few things because you end up forgetting a whole bunch. So I had students who were looking for projects. So I said, if anybody's looking for projects, I got some projects. And so I said, why don't you retype this 800-page thing of Jeff Lear's handwritten notes? And she did. And so it's fabulous. So now you have, again, a searchable document. So we could do another find on here. And we're going to look for the same thing, gambling. And then so here's a tukt, shooting a bow and arrow, or choosing which hand is the gambling stick, right? And so we'll take a look at, then I'll show you how to do like a deeper dive with these verbs. So there's the verb for it, right? So we would look at tuk to go find more information about that verb. And then ashqaq is another verb, and that means to toss gambling sticks. So there's some other game where you're kind of throwing them, right? And then ashqa is gambling, and here we see originally with sticks, but now this has also become just the rippies, bingo, poker, like they would all go under ashqa, right? So, and then there's some kind of fun, like little fine tuning stuff to do here. Because if you say Tlingit, let's play. We're not playing board games. We're not playing cards. We're not gambling. We're going out to run around, right? And so Untitled Chapter would be, let's gamble. Let's throw it down, put your money on the table, right? Or it could just be, let's play cards. So it doesn't always have, I'm not encouraging people to go gamble. It's something we did. Something to do. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't, don't. Don't lose all your money. Don't get addicted to anything. I know that rippies can be really, they can grab you. So then that's what we find for gambling. So the other thing, like these word searches are really neat. Right? So luckily people have typed these things, scanned these things for us, because we can also go into the Tlingit verb dictionary. Same thing. So we can just type for gambling here as well. And then here we see Kaji Dutukt, which means people pick other people's hands in stick gambling. That's really kind of that's the way that sentence kind of works. Iatuk, you choose, right? Then let's see what else we've got. Here's Nahin Ashqa. He is gambling with sticks. So this, again, so this is maybe Nahin is the word for the gambling sticks altogether, right? So this is how we do a little bit of investigation, because we're going to run into stuff that the speakers we have to work with might not know, or we don't have speakers to work with. And the other thing is, it does get tricky to take the language back into certain places, right? Like there was a time we knew how to do everything in our language, but now, like if I say, okay, let's just speak Tlingit and let's go cut fish, like we'd probably have to switch to English until we sort of, really the linguistic term here is domain reclamation. And that means a domain means a place or a social sort of situation where the language used to be used, like gambling, like cutting fish, like buying things, trading things. It's a type of thing or a place. And so what happened is languages just get sort of pushed out of these areas, right? Like for whatever reason, we stopped using the language for this thing, that thing, the other thing. So for example, if we're gonna go gill netting and we wanna do all that in Tlingit, then that's called going to take that domain back. We're going to take it back by bringing our language there. But that means we got to do some work before we even get there, right? Because if we're going to get in the boat and go, we got to know all those directions, right? So if we're going to tell you which way to go, or go around that rock, or there's a big boulder there under the water, we got to know how to say that stuff. So then that's called the register. So the register is the linguistic term for the type of words that you need to know to go do that thing. So that's this thing here. So you could certainly do a final project where you're, for this class, for this semester, where you're like, I'm gonna bring stick gambling back, and I'm gonna bring Tlingit back to stick gambling. And that's a great project. And it could be things like that.
I'll do it.
Okay, and so so this one, it's been forbidden, now, gambling, like for people to gamble with stuff. And then he made himself tremble, so this is like kind of shaken off. Stick gambling's about kind of tricking people. So maybe they would shake themselves to just get the willies out, right? Because like I gotta get stone faced for this thing. Because they're reading body language, they're reading your eyes. There's all kinds of stuff that people do, and sometimes it's just you put your hand under a blanket, you got a stick in one hand, and they can't see it. And then people are very good at that stuff. So then we get choose and gambling. To gamble, dice, sticks, etc. And then then we go back to the beginning. So that's how you use these sources in terms of going to look for stuff. And there's it's a very complicated language. So there's also going to be things that are hard to find, right? And so someone asked about for things to be laying there, right? So like, is that something, you know, is a dog laying there? Is a cat laying there, or anything like that? So then we get into a little bit of in-between zone with their languages, because we're, you know, if we're going to find lay down or puts, we're actually going to look for lie. And so there's lie as in to tell a lie or to be a liar, which means, I think this means you're pretending to be Raven. I think that's kind of how it translates. But then just for something to be lying there, and we get into this other thing that we kind of were talking about last week, which is it depends what it is, right? And so what we're looking for is for people to be lying there. But then it's interesting because there's a little bit of things that are not quite clear to me, whether that could actually be a dog or in this case, a flounder, sort of sitting there. And so sitting or lying there, those are some things that are a little bit complicated. So it depends on one, like what type of object it is. It's going to follow those same object categories we were looking at last time. And then this one, Xíxchʼ, is, they're doing it right now. And so you would say like, Xíxchʼ, I was lying down. And it's really literally to kind of put yourself to bed. Anything else that you folks were?
Xíxchʼ.
Okay. So how do you guys feel? How do you folks feel about the possessive marker? Do you think you got it? Do you want to practice a few more of those? We were doing kind of an introduction and looking at that chapter, trying to move through it. And then I was thinking about direction and location to talk about where things are and where they're going, which is really fun. I speak Tlingit with my kids all the time. And I was doing something, and when my kids said, "Where's your phone?" And I said, "Way day, that way." And they said, "Where day?" That was a really cool response, because it's like a Tlingish thing. So I guess we could use that in our, we'll say, "Where day you going?" So, wait, where day you niggut, right there. So anyways, what do you folks feel like doing? Quest lines are open, or I can just pick.
Well, I am ready to say my 4 sentences.
Oh yeah, we got our 4 sentences. Let's do that. So regularly, we're just going to sort of try and put a few things together. Usually it's just going to be a few sentences. Maybe we'll work our way up to just small narratives, descriptions. We're going to have some certain parameters sometimes. But if we can, and if y'all are comfortable, I would like for us to be able to see the language in addition to hearing it. I just think that's helpful for all of us at this point. And always just no pressure. We're all learners. We're just trying to use the language so that we can practice putting it into play. Otherwise, it just stays in this theoretical thing, and we'll understand it, but we won't be able to speak it. So it's Xíxchʼ.
Saganan awe kleka kachinkat yakuaki yadidis Denali kuyauk we mali shutukigtu gao leku Skalnik awe de tuk yayati Luke Titus ka Aawasháayi Ray Langford Hatawu Nick we Skun Chalk Skun kat yatinak. Gawe skun tlea. Xíxchʼ. I should have asked you if you could see that.
Chosatin.
Okay.
Yik echawe. We Xíxchʼ gao. Yewa. Yidu sak. We Kuyao Dahai. Denalik Kuya Molly. Yewa Yayakitsu. Ya Achetki. Hasiku Achatuku. Adantawe. Hasakawanik. Wasa Ishandain. Haskaukshu Owe Xíxchʼ Has. Weku Achatuku. Chagodach. Keshastu Tua Ushku. Kusi Owe Hayukatangi. Yeshakshani Owe Kledehin Hanakawanik. Khatiauksaka. Kesh etuwu Xíxchʼ. Wasa Ishandain Hakawashu. Chutle Teshka Tua Ushku Hayukatangi. Tlakoy adat yutuchtatanj. Wasa at wune. Wasa at kawaha hastakach. Kawasa haslushke. Wiku atlatu kuch aku. Ka hasu. Kagachta kihiti tate. Aku hastituwasa guhayukatangi hasawa jaki. Kesh hasayawa tlak koa. Kesh hasha yawatlak. Hayukatangi hatuye yeti Yesu stakatuhan. Yigo ayakwan. So this particular episode is about residential schools, boarding schools. My kids' teachers were talking about this as well. This is episode 1 for Molly of Denali, the TV show on PBS. And it's makes me think of the way that people suffered. So Ishandain Haskawashu. And then there's you could add agency to that. Ishandain Haskawashu. They just tortured kids and just really made them suffer. Marge Dudson used to talk to me about it, and she said they tortured us, they beat us, they humiliated us, they did everything they could because they wanted to kill our language. But she said, they couldn't get it out of me. And I would talk to her about that stuff and about her lived experiences. So Xíxchʼ for sharing. And there was a phrase that I always think of that Shani Marge Dudson shared with us, and she said, Xíxchʼ wasa Ishandain hakawashu chuteklekatuwa hayukatangi. Which she translated for me as, it's impossible for you to feel how much we suffered when people didn't want our language. So I always think about the ones who kept it going, who kept it alive. Xíxchʼ, Selena Eberson would talk about her brother and Kashkawu, Cyril George, when they all went to Sheldon Jackson, and the teachers said, you will not speak your language on these grounds. And her brother and his friends would jump in the air and speak Tlingit and laugh, but then they were still sad about it today, the things that they endured for us. So sometimes I like to use that as just motivation to say, it'd be nice if we could all take big breaks, but you kind of can't with this stuff. And it's got to be just such this everyday part of your life that you're just going to keep. And I just like to say to learners, like, find your comfort zone and then take one step beyond it. So, and that you're always pushing yourself to do that, because it's real easy to just know more than almost everybody. And you're like, got it. But then, you're just going to get stuck, because then someone's going to talk to you and you're like, I don't know. Right. And so we just keep pushing, and we keep, we owe it to the ones who suffered for us to push ourselves and to become as good as we can. Xíxchʼ. Anybody else like to share?
Xíxchʼ.
I still don't have a word for sentence. I'm gonna have to talk with maybe Nakatlan and Kakatlan. Maybe Ushdushati Katangi. I don't know. It's words that are stuck together. Figure it out. Anybody else like to share? 4 sentences. You can do it on Thursday too. If you're not ready, you do it on Thursday.
Xíxchʼ way dachun sentences. Say what cook?
Wait, dakun sentences. That's one, but that's not a. No, I was kidding. I forgot the 4 sentences, right? And this is yeah. So it's okay, because usually when I'll sort of say, I got a pretty loose way of teaching. And so like sometimes people will be like, hey, aren't we gonna do that thing? I was like, yeah, let's do the thing that I said we're gonna do, right? So usually on Thursday, I'll try and think of something for us to do so that we've got like a mini project over the weekend. And then I don't grade these things. I just we just talk. That's the goal, is just talk and keep learning. The insider secret is I don't evaluate people based on how well they speak in terms of like lining that up with a grade, like ever. There's just too much pressure when it comes to learning and using indigenous languages. I just say, show up and do the work. And then I just like to give feedback. And so I would really rather not have grading involved, but you know, it's part of it. So everybody shows up, everybody does what they can. And if you just try when you're asked to, everybody gets like the A+. Gold stars are going to come down upon you. So just, you know, the big thing is let's keep trying. And then also, like if I come up with an idea on Thursday, that means we'll do it the next Tuesday and Thursday. So like if you don't get it done by Tuesday, you can say, oh, I'll do mine on Thursday. Right? Anybody else want to tell us your 4 sentences if you got them?
I'll do it. The tough one to follow. I'll do it. So worked on this within our study group. Had some help with Miss Clock on this one. Aawasháayi, Aawasháayi, Tlingit Untitled Clock on Chagude, Tlingit Wutu Washkage, K at Gaktushi, Ga K Gaktu Guat, Sadakati Han, Yidana Yagak to Dlok. Hooch.
Yeah, okay. Xíxchʼ, Hayi
Kulchish.
Yedakakaku, Kodnachas Aawasháayi, Kualka. Chatsuar Tlilkadin Chashaguk. We Tlingit Yukatangi Kuti Koa, we Adatki in. Just Kausagu tin, Aya Kakwaak. Daukasa, Qualchadasa. Just Yata Yak. Daukasa. Naka away. Has Uwatok. Naka Eo Achtuati has Ausaku. Wasak Ausaku. Ya Alka Kadnahin. Xíxchʼ. Wuke Ha.
Kulchish.
And it always depends on what kind of programs you folks are using, but there's usually ways to turn off auto spell check stuff, which is, it's so useful when you type in English, because I make typos, so many typos in 2 languages, like equal amounts. And then there's no hope for me in Tlingit. There's continuously errors, and some people do really give me a hard time about it. But just so those squiggly lines can be kind of distracting.
Oh,
So
my
there
bad.
sometimes are ways to get rid of those. Like usually if you get into whatever program it is, the preferences, you could just turn that off.
Dink. I don't know.
You can do it at a time. I saw a presentation one time where this guy is like, you could develop a dictionary in Microsoft Word for your language. I was like, get out of here. Nobody's got the time for that. You can do like every single version of every single verb is impossible. And it was a really long presentation. I was like, you could tell me this in 5 minutes. Like I said, they went for like 45 minutes. It's like, it's a nice thought though. But yeah, there's usually a way to just totally just turn off, because it's usually called dynamic spelling or check spelling while you type, or and so, but yeah, I wouldn't worry about it now.
Look at the word it thinks it is.
Ooh, Walpurgisnacht.
Uchawa.
I hadn't seen that verb form before on his second sentence that says "Tlall un chashke." Is the un common in that form for like I or maybe anybody?
Oh yeah. So if in that one, so there's a couple of different things. One is the positive form of this is sort of like saying it always happens. Like you could say "Atnacha kuch," and so "Atnacha kuch" would be like I always go driving, right? Or I always go boating, just all the time. But if you put tesh in front of it, then you would think sometimes you're like, oh, well, if you say not, then that means I never do it. But that means I haven't done that yet. And so where the u comes from is there's a in the front of it. So that when it meets the perfective marker, will change to u. And so like if you look up top, there's this, and it says Aawasháayi. So, and then we saw the name of the word was Xíxchʼ. So there's a number of things that have this letter A in front of this sound. Xíxchʼ, Astech, Asqeu, Atlech. And so like Xíxchʼ is gambling, Astech is fishing with a hook, Asqeu is fishing with a net, and then Atlech is dancing. And so that A will be in there. Interestingly, like a lot of the body functions are that way as well. So you could say, Aawasháayi, I burped. So that's got the A in there. Aawasháayi, I went pee. Aawasháayi, I went poop. And those are the verbs like they would never, only our uncles would teach us those ones. And a select number of aunties who weren't shy about it, but sometimes they would publicly, but there were plenty of times where they'd just be quiet and someone would kind of lecture us for asking about it. And then after everybody left, one of them would go, come here, and kind of tell us how to say that stuff. But it's interesting that a lot of those body functions have it. Audagon, it's locked into that one. So we kind of usually call it like an A thematic or an A theme. And that just means you got to remember that A is just locked onto the front of that verb.
Okay.
Cool. Sheesh. You too, Miss Clock.
Okay.
I could share mine real quick.
Sheesh.
This is my journal, and this is the section on Yakdat. Yakdat Kukwatin. Kachus Hitan Tuk Nietzsche, de watua kuch, Jew Satan. A itsutat, wash watua cha, kakahwe watua luk. Hachga ish at akawa chak, chutle kach shachit. Rene watua kuch. And that's all I have. And I welcome corrections if you see some.
Okay, that looks good. The day attaches to the niche. And then if you weren't on the beach, then you were Xíxchʼ. So it should be, I think that was high tone, E_K. So we're going to get to this direction and location business, but there's a couple of things that are just really kind of fascinating. One of them is the ocean beach. The ocean beach is Ir if you're up on the land. If you're down on the beach, then it's Niche. If you're out in the water on the ocean, then it's Yan. So what you call it kind of depends on where you're at.
Oh, so if we were driving from,
So because we're ocean going people, when you talk about going to the shore of the ocean, you have to say where you're coming from. And so it's either going to be Xíxchʼ or Yande. Let me just check the tone. I think it's high. Let me check. Yeah, so it's a high tone. High tone E, underline K. Xíxchʼ. Mm-hmm. And then the day, when we do these direction and location, which we're getting ready to. So we're going to keep going through the beginning Tlingit workbook, and then there's this intermediate concept we're learning at the same time. And the intermediate concept is these directional suffixes as well. They can be long or short, it doesn't matter. But the day must be the opposite of the tone before it. So you're going to go hit day, but then you would go, Yande is high. And so if it was something that was low tone, like each day, then that day will be high.
Okay.
But usually we write them, and this isn't like a correct, incorrect thing. We typically, I write them short, but you can write them short or long.
Oh, for this part? Day.
Well, that's got to stay long, the day part.
Oh, this part. Okay.
And then something that you'll also learn is if you got there, you would say Watu'akuch, short and high. But if you said you just went that direction, it would be Watu'akuch, long and low.
Okay.
Two O's instead of the short U.
Okay. What about
It's a nice verb.
Oh, Jusatan.
Mm-hmm. I like that. It's rough water.
Yeah. Xíxchʼ, can that be for taking photos? I took photos.
Yeah. I would usually say Aawasháayi Xíxchʼ, because then people will. Otherwise, they'll think you could be journaling or just drawing a picture.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Xíxchʼ.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, so always like the general sort of guideline is you'll just present, and then I'll just give a response and just say something often. And think I did this time. But that's how I kind of like to do it, just to sort of think about using it as a launch into a conversation. And then if you can think of anything you want to say as well in Tlingit, you are always welcome to do so. So let's try and just generally sort of, you'll share your thing and then I'll give a response in Tlingit, and we'll try to just talk a little bit if we can, no pressure. And then if you want to, you could say, I welcome corrections or feedback. Let's just say I welcome feedback, because I also don't like the idea of right and wrong all the time. But if you don't ask for it, I'm not going to necessarily give you feedback. And so I want to just really honor like the language safe space, because not everybody's ready for it. Because sometimes you share the language and then someone's like, hey, you've messed this thing up. And then you feel bad and then you don't want to do it again. So it's totally okay if you just share it and then we just sort of acknowledge it and move on. I just want to just do the work collectively that we're creating a comfort zone for us to share the language and to use the language. And then sometimes not have corrections and sometimes have, feedback if you want it. Okay. Anybody else want to share any sentences with us? And thanks for writing those down. Pictures certainly help. I really like that we're doing pictures and kind of little, either slideshow, and not like you have to, you could just put it on some kind of document, but if you share the screen so we can read it, that does help. Because we're learning the language as kind of reading and writing at the same time, so it's good. Okay. Okay. Well, I thought something fun to do this week would be to start incorporating some stories into the work that we do. And so I like stories just in general, and then I really like Tlingit stories and to use them as teaching tools. So some of the things that we try to do is to just sort of, what I like us to do is to take turns reading a sentence, and then, oh, Xíxchʼ, yeah, well, we'll do you, Erica. So you read a sentence, and then I'll just ask you anything you recognize there. I'm not asking you to translate it, just anything you recognize. And so what I like to do is kind of go one person at a time. Whoever reads gets a chance to try and translate it. And then you, no pressure, just say, and that's all I could figure out. Then I'll ask everybody if anybody has any ideas on what the sentence might be saying. And then we'll sort of look at the translation. Erica, eat for her.
Cheese. It's gonna be real quick. Sorry, guys. It's usually between me and my partner. Xíxchʼ at nati. Xíxchʼ. Aawasháayi. Du huchwe. Dewe. Cheese.
Cheese. Okay, yeah, and so I really like too, like these short conversations and stuff to make and figure out how we can communicate things. And then also just like, Xíxchʼ is what you use to say like it's all gone, it's all out. It could also mean they got killed. Like it depends on the context, right? So you can say like, oh yeah, and then he saw this person, and then he fought this and then Xíxchʼ, right? That's it, done, right? But it could also mean just like it's all gone, like whatever, this paper towel, and I take the last one, then you went to get one, I'm like, Xíxchʼ, right? Then maybe I'll get some more, but so Xíxchʼ is like it's all gone, that's it, it's over. And that's a good way to sort of end your speech as well. It just sort of signals to everybody that you're done, not that you have to. And then day away is like knock it off, right? But it depends on the context. So that's one, if y'all are out there raising kids, you gotta use that one all the time. Like day away, like just knock it off, especially these moody.
I tried to say fine, that's enough.
Yeah, that's enough, right? There's the tone, the way you deliver it says a lot, Then there's also like illi, which is don't, just like a general, like don't. Because like klaik is no, illi is don't. And then illi day would be like, knock it off right now. And so these are just fun things to sort of use and to put into practice. You know, if I got bilingual kids and I have to tell people, like, if you want to see kids who don't listen in any language, come check it out. But I'm just kidding. My kids are great. They're fun. But, you know, we were getting together with these elders and we said, okay, we're going to start this immersion preschool language nest thing. What are some things we need to know how to say to kids? And they were just teasing. They were just having fun. But they're like, Xíxchʼ, which is shut up, and day away, which is knock it off, and Jinuk, which is like let go of it or drop it. And then day away, you know, knock it off. Hooch away, it's all done. Yeah, so it was fun.
I used to hear my dad say chukde.
Yeah, so chuk and chuk day. And so it's good to know also like the uses of these, because sometimes, you know, like someone came to observe me teaching Tlingit one time, and I told people Xíxchʼ, and then later he was like, that was kind of mean, you know, because I was like, shut up. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we were just kidding, because you could joke a lot too if you know people pretty well. But yeah, so chuk or juk is scram, get out of here, right? And so, but these are the things like when we learn the kinship structure, these go down the tree. You don't go up the tree. You don't tell grandma to chuk, right? Because then we'll have to write up your obituary and be like, yeah, he was a cool guy, I know him, you know. So, but it's fun stuff, you know, and then to know, but then there's other ways too, like just continuing to think about the cultural uses of the language. I think we talked about this. Did we talk about that? No, that was a different group. So let me put this in the chat. So there's a phrase. Are you folks familiar with that one? Can somebody interpret that for me?
Forgive me now.
Yeah. So forgive me, you know, and we would use this a lot. So we would say Tlingit Xíxchʼ. So you could, like, a lot of times when we were learning, the group of us that were kind of learning together in the early 2000s, especially, a lot of times when we stood up to speak Tlingit, we would say Tlingit. Like I'm learning Tlingit. But then what we found is when we started going into immersion environments, we were using this just like English would use the term excuse me. And what do you mean when you say excuse me? What are the different ways you could use that in English?
Pushing past somebody.
Yeah, you're either saying I'm coming near you, or you're saying get out of my way. It could be either one of those things.
Getting someone's attention?
Yeah, getting someone's attention. And sometimes the tone means a lot, because you'd be like, excuse me. You'd be like, excuse me, right? And so the Tlingit does use tone, but not as much as English does, in terms, not like high tone, low tone, but like the tone of your voice. What else?
Well, as a politeness after making a human sound. Let's say a burp.
Burp, you fart, you hiccup, you know, do any of those things, and then, you know, excuse me, slurp your soup. I don't know. It just means like, but it's kind of along the line of a social, like, whoops, you know, kind of along those lines. But then rarely is it used for, like, if you really mess up, right? Like if you really make a mistake. And so like, let's say you knocked over someone's flower pot and then broke this nice vase they had. I don't think you'd say, oh, excuse me, right? That would seem kind of disregarding them, like socially. So this is not excuse me. Cha'adei is not excuse me. So because we were in immersion, we were using this for all those types of things. And so like I was trying to get past somebody and I said, Cha'adei, and the elder said, okay, stop, we gotta use English for a second here. They said, you're wearing that phrase out. That's the phrase you use when you really mess up and you need somebody to actually forgive you. And I said, well, what do I say? And they said, which is get out of my way, which isn't rude in Tlingit, right? Which is interesting. Like if you said that, like let's say post-COVID, whatever, you're at a grocery store, coffee shop, and someone's just kind of in your way and not paying attention. And you said, get out of my way, right? Like that would be considered rude. But in Tlingit, it's just move out of my path, right? And it's not, I don't think it's considered rude. So anyways, Cha'adei is a good phrase to know though. Like let's say and I also don't, we used to use it before we started speaking Tlingit. Actually, I don't really recommend that. Not for here. Like if someone asks you to go, it can really bail you out sometimes because then the people listening to you, if you just said those two phrases in a row, they will be forgiving for you because it's, if you make a mistake or something, they'll understand. But there was a time Sháatkʼ, Walter Sobolev, was giving this big speech, and it was beautiful, it was wonderful, and both English and Tlingit lights out amazing. And this was in Xíxchʼ, and people from the Xíxchʼ tribe of Alaska were walking around asking people to respond. And so they asked me to give a response. I was like, oh, all right, I'll give it a try. And this was, I think, 2004, maybe 2002. So it was quite a while ago. And so I stood up and I looked at Sháatkʼ, Dr. Walter Sobolev, sitting in his nachin and his big clan hat. And then I looked past and there's a whole bunch of clan leaders just sitting up there, and all of them knew Tlingit at that time. And everything I had thought that I was gonna say was just poof, just disappear. So I said, Tlingit. And Xíxchʼ, Herman Davis, was sitting over there. He just yelled out really loud, Yekwati. And then I felt okay. And I just talked, right? So sometimes these phrases can help, but I wouldn't necessarily use it all the time. Because if you're a learner, you're gonna make mistakes. So you could, if you stood up, you could just say, I'm just gonna try. And then use it. But then in the context of our class, when we're trying to learn and use it, you don't have to apologize. You don't have to worry. Okay. Any thoughts, questions? Oh, Chakakwaak. Let me put that on. I'm just gonna try. I'm gonna try it out. And then, and so these are good ones to know. And so we'll every now and then we'll just go over some useful phrases and stuff for situations. Okay, we'll start looking at this story. We'll go for 5-10 minutes and we'll take a break, and then we'll see what folks want to do.
I had a quick question.
Oh, yeah, please, go ahead.
Yekwati.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant. Is that like do it or?
Oh, okay, yeah.
You said Herman Davis said that, and I've heard that. I've heard like in dance groups when they say Yangeone, and they say and then Yiguayakon, Yekwati. So I was like, what does that mean? Like I'll do it? Is that a response?
Mm-hmm. I'm just typing a couple things here. Good question. Yeah, thanks. And yeah, if I ever say something you're not sure what it means, just, yeah, feel free to ask. So with dance groups, there's this pretty common kind of almost like a script. So like to try and get each other like fired up, or sometimes just to say like the dance group is coming in is really what they're doing. So someone will ask, are y'all ready? And then they'll usually say, ah, or ah, they'll say some version of yes, right? And then whoever's the dance group leader who's doing it's kind of a motivational talk. They'll say, Yigu ayakwan, y'all have strength and courage. And then the dance group will respond, Yekwati, which is it will be. So this is fun. So we've got like just like Aawasháayi, you've got yayati. That's how it is. This is this verb, yati, right? And we're gonna watch how it changes. So then you could say yewuti. That's how it was. And then the future form is gonna be yekwati, which is technically like, oops, that's how it will be, right? And so as we look at these, yati, wuti, kakwati, this is a pattern that you're gonna start to see. And you're gonna start to spot these things, like this W sound that sort of is right there at the front. And this one changes to an M sound for a lot of inland speakers. That's usually signaling, not really past tense, but it's sort of saying, we're gonna look at this thing in terms of whether or not it has happened. And there are, and we say it's like it's not really time, because you can have verbs where I would say it the same for right now as I would say yesterday. Right, so yeti right now, wuti yesterday. Chwasatin right now, chwasatin yesterday. Chwasaku right now, chwasaku yesterday. Right, so some of them it's more event based, like whether or not it happened, as opposed to time based. Yeah, good question. Xíxchʼ. Okay, so this story will give us a little bit of a break from our routine. I just like to throw stories in there now and then, because then we get bigger chunks of language, and it gives us interesting things to talk about. So this is Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, Sháatkʼ. Although I think I have to adjust the title. I got feedback from an elder in Xíxchʼ who said, well, technically, the male married the female, and that was how that verb usually worked. And so, well, I'll see. Tlingit, but Aawasháayi is the verb for she or he married somebody. Technically, he married a woman, I guess. I'm not trying to tell anybody who to marry or anything like that. I'm just giving you the feedback that I received on that, how that verb works. Yées is new or young. Sháatkʼ is a woman who is at the age where she's old enough to be in relationships and getting, potentially getting married, certainly old enough to have kids. And so that's what the Sháatkʼ part. And then Xíxchʼ is a frog. Xíxchʼ, this is a Tlingit story. So Xíxchʼ becomes Xíxchʼ, just like those rules that we learned about the possessive suffix. Kachwan ish, George Davis, Kashakshani, Marge Dudson, Haskakawanik. George Davis was Tachdain Tan. He was born in the Huna area, but he grew up in Cake. He spoke like the Cake people. And then Shakshani, Marge Dudson, was Ishkitan. And so she's from the interior She grew up mostly in the Hoona area and Douglas. Well, mostly Douglas, right? And then Xíxchʼ is the verb for translating or interpreting. So they translated this. This story was initially written in English through the Tlingit Haida Head Start program. Michael Dixon, Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, Xíxchษ์. So Michael Dixon drew the pictures. Tlingit Haida Gold Belt Heritage Foundation, that's who funded this project. And there's their logo, there's their logo. That's the University of Alaska Southeast logo. Yashkashnikach tu asaguyi inka kwashanigi. Hastikhedach ayakach shahit kahwana ish kashakshani. Haskakawanik ayayata Central Council Tlingit Kade Kina Hastuyejine Owe Hajit Wuduwati Kawe Adati Jutune. I should probably be, since we did it already. Okay. Oh, I guess this one is already, oh, I guess it's translated, huh? Hold on, let me see if I got a different version. Okay, well, I guess I'll just do this one. So you can see the English, so there's no, you don't have to guess, but what I like us to do is take turns reading a sentence and just tell me, so you can see the translation there, but I want you to tell me the words that you just know them already, you know how they work. And then I might point out a couple other things as we go. So there are 16 of us. So I'd like everybody to read at least one sentence. Who would like to go first?
I gotta read the first one.
Xíxchʼ.
Awe Yashkash'k Sháatkʼ we Tlingit Aniq Yati.
Okay. Xíxchʼ. Yashx'k Yées Sháatkʼ we Tlingit Aniq Yati. So a couple of, well, let's just say, what words do you know in there? Gosh.
Tlingit. Aniq looks like Ani.
Yeah, what?
Sháatkʼ, you said was or Yées Sháatkʼ, beautiful woman.
Young woman, yep.
I think that's probably it.
Okay. 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 So yeah is like right here, but if you put it before a noun, it's sort of like saying this, and then way is over there. But if you put it before a noun, it means that. So this and that, that's kind of how they work. Xíxchʼ on its own means beautiful. And so of a person, like they have a beautiful head, is really how it works. So Xíxchʼ, this is a very similar suffix to the possessive one, except it tends to stay low. And basically you put it on the end of a verb, and it makes a lot of verbs into adjectives. So Xíxchʼ would be a good person. Xíxchʼ would be an evil person. Xíxchʼ would be a beautiful person. Tla'ani would be a kind person. And then, you know, you would have the person after that. And then Tlingit Ani, we just got to get a little, there should be a little pause between those two, because if this is an apostrophe, Tlingit Ani, that means the world. But otherwise, if we hear Tlingit Ani, a lot of times we'll think Tlingit land, but in this case, it's a Tlingit village. And then this marks where something is. And when you have this, and then yayati right after, it means it's located there. So you could say, Minneapolis yayati, Xíxchʼ. My auntie is in Minneapolis. Xíxchʼ yayati, Xíxchʼ. My uncle's in Skagway. Juneau yayati. I'm in Juneau. Xíxchʼ. Can I get another reader for this one?
Haini kach awe hastu tua sigu dishayi kua du tu yeyati hastu ka yanach yake.
Xíxchʼ. And Elias, any words you recognize? Like we got the translation there, but any of these words that you feel like you just know?
Hastu, okay. I feel like I know what due to yeyati means, but I can't remember the specific
Okay.
translation.
Xíxchʼ. Okay. So yeah, let's walk it through here. Shiyadahin is a verb which means many, and that usually is talking about living things because it means a whole bunch of heads that move together. It's kind of like literally how it works. Doesn't mean like that's what you mean. It just means many. But you usually don't have, and a lot of speakers will use it, but it wouldn't be like a bunch of pencils maybe, or a bunch of rocks. There's other ways to say that, yage or atlein. This is usually like living things. And then shayadahini, again, there are a whole bunch of them. Ka is a person or a man, and then ka would be, so there's that plural marker. So many people, in this case, they are men, many men. Awe just gives us a little separation between ideas. Hastu, so there, like T-H-E-I-R. And then tuwasagu is want. Hastu tuwasagu, they want. And what do they want? Dushayi. So here's another trick. If you find a verb, then you put this relational marker, which is exactly like the possessive marker. They want to eat. Hastu tuwasagu. Xíxchʼ. They want to eat. They want to go there. Right, so that's the trick, to tie two things together. What do they want? They want that. So dushayi is for someone to marry her. So in this case, lots of men want to marry her. Ku'a can do a couple different things, either like some sort of logical turn, like they wanted to, but this other thing. It could also be used to just specify who we're talking about, right? So I might say, you think this, I think that, right? And so I'd say Xíxchʼ or wa'eq'o'a. So sometimes it's just showing who we're actually talking about. But in this case, it's saying, they all want to marry her, but due to wu yayati. So there's the yayati verb again. It keeps popping up. That's how it is. Due to wu. And this is how stories work. Once we have sort of a main character, when we hear du, that's probably the main one we're talking about. This young girl. She's the du here. Due to wu, you can interpret as her thoughts, her feelings, her intentions, her desires, her spirit. But once you say due to wu yayati, that could be that's how she felt, or that's how she thought, right? Ach tu wu yayati, that's how I feel. Ach tu wu yayati, that's how I think about it. right? So that's the way that phrase works when you put it together like that. Hastu kaya nach yake. Kaya nach, when you got hastu, it means more than them. So when you put this together, she's better than all of them, right? Which is a very nice way to think about things. But you know, in the setting of the story, this is the way it goes. We'll do one more, then we'll take our break. Can somebody read this one?
I'll read it.
Oh, okay.
Hastu ani dagige we are plain kudziti.
Okay. And words that you recognize there?
Their land, their community. Hastu ani. Plain is a big lake.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yep. So hastu is there, right? And then ani, we see the possessed form again of land or village. Dagige is in the middle of something. There's a couple different ways to talk about it, but just sort of like geographically in the center of sort of an area. That's a really good one to use. Then is a lake. Plain is an adjective. So we can come after a noun and it makes the thing big. Hit plain would be a big house or a big building. Kuhida plain would be a big pencil, right? And kudziti is a verb, just means it exists. So it's there, right? So it'll take us a little while to get through the whole story, but this is how I like to do these sometimes, is we'll just sort of go through and just take turns reading it. So we're getting the story and little increments, but we're also just sort of practicing saying these longer sentences. Then we're taking a look at what kinds of things are there so we can know how to use them later to say other things. So Cajun Winnits we'll rest for 5 minutes, so we'll check back in and then we'll see what folks want to do after that. We can keep going on the story if you guys want, or we can shift and look at something else. So give it a thought, come back in 5. Okay. What do you folks want to work on? If I give you a choice.
I like the book.
Dasa,
I thought the book was nice.
the story. So I keep going with that.
Katsu, I like the story too.
Okay. So let's do that, and then maybe the last 20 minutes or 15 minutes of class, we'll try something different. So, okay. Let's see, where was that? Okay. Make sure my windows are open here. Okay. Who would like to read next? Just make sure if you haven't read yet, that you give it a try.
I'll read.
Ah, good. Xíxchʼ.
Tledahin aya dukitin ya ya de haswu at.
Okay. Xíxchʼ. Tleidahina dukiktin. Ayach haswu at. Anything you recognize in there?
Well, that Tledahin, I'm guessing, is that them walking beside the lake? Tledahin aya?
Tleidahin is once.
Once, really. Like Clayk, I guess, huh?
Yeah, so you could say dachtahin would be twice. So for example, you could say dachtahin awa yitin kachwanik. I told you twice. Dachtahin awa akawa gwach nadak kach. Knocked on the, and so sometimes it's used as a way of like counting the number of times something happens. So that dahin is what you just throw on there. Kleidahin, dachtahin, naskadahin, dachundahin. However, in storytelling, kleidahin could also mean one time, like this one time. That type.
That's a new one for me. Dukik tin ya. I know he's talking about his younger sister, her younger sister.
Yeah, Dukik tin is with her younger sister.
I guess where that part of the lake must be that part here. Ya de.
Yep. So the ocean has ik or niche or yan, but a lake does not have niche. The only niche is at the ocean. But a lake and a river have ayach or yach. So this on its own, yach, right in the middle, Y-A-A-N-X, is along the edge of. So this is how you'd say sit at the table. Nadak yach qanu. So that's, and so a lot of times you might think da or just, and this is where we're going to get to this stuff. Like, how do you just start saying this stuff? Under, around, and every language treats those things different. So if you want to go down to the lake, this is how you'd usually say. You say yachte or chayachte. The cha is the mouth, right? So we have a mouth. Things have an opening. But for a body of water, that's right at the edge of the water. And what's cool is like a road or a path, and it has the same stuff as a river. Ayach would be right at the edge of the road. Yach would be down on the roadside.
Okay. So the face or next to that lake.
Oh, you muted. Mute Xíxchʼ.
Oh, whoops. So next to that lake right there, around the mouth of it, they were walking.
Right. And then a little pointer, this is something we're going to look at more. When you have day or dach or nach for the direction part, then you should expect it to be long and low. Wu'at. If they came inside, then it would be short. But we'll get to that part, right? But for now, just whenever you see two A's, keep it long. Yep. Okay. Yep. So those are all the parts. One time, Aya and Owe are just used to get a little separation with her younger sister. So now here's a whole sentence pattern. We could say she went to the lakeside with her mom. Kledehinaya du klatin. We can also say, well, we won't keep changing it, but okay. Can I get a reader for this one? Everybody takes a turn.
Can I read? Oh. You can go ahead if you want to. Okay. Shaya de Shani Xíxchʼ Hayach Has Yawaki.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Shiyadehini Xíxchʼ Ayach Has Yawaki. And we all have to just be conscious that we're trying, but you got to power through, because sometimes if we're not sure, we're going to say Yawaki, and it's like you're going to pull that tone up when we see it's low, right? It's just we work on it. It happens. Everybody who learns one language from another will bring those patterns in. So like if you're in Hawaii, this is a question. So it goes up and then down. In English, this is a question. In Tlingit, it's like, this is a question, right? So it's just, we do it with particles, right? So again, any words you recognize there? Tagweki? Which one? Yeah, so the lake, right? Okay. And then here's Chayach again. So that's, again, at that edge of the lake, the shore of the lake. There's different ways we could think about that, but that's the shore. Because if you were to say, Hindenagu, and if I had to listen to you, I would walk right into the water. So, but if you said, Chayachtenagu, then if I had to listen to you, I would just go to the shore of the lake. So here's Shiyadehini again. So there's many. Here's Xíxchʼ again, frogs. So again, it doesn't have to pluralize, not all the time. Ayach, then we get Has Yawaki. They were sitting there. And that's what the Yawaki verb is doing. Okay. Xíxchʼ. The first part is Gua, in case you're wondering on this one. Can someone read this page?
I'll read it.
Sheesh. And the staring contest. Woo.
Gwa 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 Yahweh Hasache.
Goodness, sheesh. Gua, 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 gua. Yahweh Hasache. And words you recognize there. Kutrich.
Yahweh.
That is how it was, yeah. Okay. Goodness, sheesh. Yeah, so gua is just a frog noise, right? And so Yahweh is, that's how it is, or that's, you know. And so that is the way Hasatche They are singing right now. So the hus is pluralizing the third person, and then atsh is singing right now. Not a song, they're just singing, right? Those are the parts for that one. And Xíxchʼ. Oh, someone gets a fun one. Whoever wants to read this one.
Xíxchʼ Sháatkʼ hus Aawasháayi. Kudach Xíxchʼ.
Xíxchʼ. Xíxchʼ Hasakawashuk. Xíxchʼ. Any words you recognize in there?
Xíxchʼ is pretty, Sháatkʼ is little, hus is they, Aawasháayi. Aawasháayi is I laughed. Aawasháayi. Something to do with laughing. Kunach is a lot. Kudach, I'm not sure. Xíxchʼ. I don't know.
Okay, there's Xíxchʼ. Yeah, so Xíxchʼ, so we see it again. It's a verb that's being turned into an adjective. So the beautiful. Sháatkʼ is a young woman. Aawasháayi is to really laugh at something. And so this is a verb that's really worth pointing out because there's quite a few stories. Like when people do this verb to animals, their life gets all messed up. So don't, this is a Tlingit value thing. You are not supposed to, that's like really pointing and laughing, sometimes people do this if people like fall down, not if they get hurt, but if they fall down or it's something you just really kind of laugh. And so this verb, there's a thin line between like having fun and really just kind of being mean. And so in this case, she is being mean. So she's really laughing at these frogs. And so the hus is the frogs, right? So usually when you're doing a laughing verb, there's an object and the object is the one getting laughed at. Is like yuck. Kunach is really, and kudach is too much. So you can have, if you live in Juneau, it could be kusiat in the wintertime. And then if you went up to Klakwan, it could be kunach kusiat, where it's really cold. And then if you kept going north up to Whitehorse, it could be kudach kusiat, too cold, right? And then you just run back home. So this one it's too much. Yi is y'all. Xíxchʼ is hideous looking, ugly. So this is be very careful with this one. I will just flat out say I never taught it to you, even though there's video evidence. I'll just totally pull a politician move. Like, I did not teach that phrase to those people, right? But this is how you would say it. If you look in the Tlingit verb dictionary, it will say frogs are ugly. And so it means ugly. So it's just like saying, y'all are just really too ugly. Again, there's a lesson here. Don't say this stuff to animals. You can tease each other with phrases like this. But if you don't know them, don't say it. And if you don't know the people who are listening to you, don't say it. But it does exist. There's ways to say this stuff.
What about with Halloween coming up, like describing Halloween characters, costumes?
Yeah, so if someone has like some kind of zombie mask, they could really be Xíxchʼ. So it is. It's kind of like really hideous looking, just really, really bad. But we're respectful people, even though we know how to say stuff like this. We just sort of learn how to use it with caution. But if you got to throw it down with somebody, do your own way. Okay. Can I get a reader for this one?
Yinde shu kauditan ka a chayat achdach awashat we Xíxchʼ.
Sheesh. Yindeshkau de tan. Ka ach ayach dach awashat. Ah, okay. Any words you recognize in there?
Kauditan. And
That's okay. Yeah. There's the lake again. Chayach is at the edge of the lake or the shore. So now we see we can have chayach de, chayach dach, right? And so again, we can apply this to other things. Nadauk yach de nagu, go be around the table. Nadauk yach dach nagu, get out from being near the table, right? Yinde shkau de tan. Has anybody heard that one before? Anybody ever heard of Yucatan Tlita? At kachako owe Yucatan Tlita o an hasa kawachakwan kanins. A carver uses a bent knife, a crooked knife. That's that carving knife that's bent. So this verb means to bend something. Yinde is downwards. The SH that pops up before a verb means to do that thing to yourself. Usually, like shchodzetin, I saw myself. Shtuchaltu, I'm studying or I'm teaching it to myself, inside of myself. In this case, shkaudetan, she bent herself downwards, literally, which means she bent over. She bent down. Ka ayach dach. So we see day is towards, dach is away from. Day, dach, day, dach. We're seeing them pop up. Aawasháayi, to grab it or to catch it. So in this case, ayach dach aawasháayi, she picked it up off of the lake shore with Xíxchʼ, that frog. Okay. Okay, Xíxchʼ. Maybe we'll do two more and see how we're feeling. Cook, Natu. Somebody read it. This one's nice and
Aawasháayi awdligini ye yawaka. Tlach ayanachawa, tlach iyakus an. Tlach ade Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi.
Sheesh. Aawasháayi awdligini yawaka. Tlach ayanach awe tlach iyakus an. Tlach ade Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. What words do you recognize?
I recognize yawaka, and then whatever comes after that is what they said. So they said, no, I don't. I recognize tlach ade Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi is not the way she did something to the frog.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll walk through these various parts here. So you see the walk sort of built in here. So Xíxchʼ. Xíxchʼ is the pupils of the eye, which is it's a really wild term if you do break it down. I think it means the eye has a cavity in it, like a cavern, which is wild. And then the T part means at. Autliqin is to look at. So she while looking right at its pupil, she looked at while looking it right in the eye. Yeya waka, she said. Kach ayanach. So at the intermediate Tlingit level, we also start learning like how do you do these things, like to say good, really good, very good, really very good, just super really. You could just keep adding on to it, right? So for example, you say yak good, kunach yak really good, kach yak very good, kach kunach yak really very good. And you can keep going. And so this is one, kach is very, ayanach, more than it. But when you put those together, kach ayanach, it's like really blowing it up. Like this thing is really getting big. But then what she says after is not. Here's another not nice thing. But this, she's teaching it to you. I'm not teaching it to you. Kech iyakusan. So yaksaan would mean like a pleasant face. So typically there is this thing in Tlingit that I always caution like how much we gender things, but there's kind of gendered language a little bit in English, where typically you'd say a female would be beautiful, a man would be handsome. We do have a similar thing in Tlingit. And I'm not trying to say, which one you have to use, but Xíxchʼ is more commonly used with females. Yaksaan is more commonly used with males. But then the negative version is kech yakusan, which means not pleasant looking, right? So we already had ugly, so now we go way over the top. Kach ayanach kech yakusan. You were so very not good, like you were so ugly, so very ugly. And then we get like a complicated verb form. So we could take a verb and we put the suffix on it, ye, and then we put ye. And that means the place where that verb happened. So for example, yanakut is to walk. And if there's a place where Raven walked, maybe, we might call it ach yanakut, the place where Raven walked. But when we put ade in front of the verb and ye after the verb, that means the way the verb happened. So for example, I might say, kasiye awa ade yanakut. It's strange the way that person is walking. Right? So now we're talking about the way it happened. It's good the way you're talking, right? But when we put kesh ade and then we have yeh after it, that means cannot, can't. Kesh aden kotai, I can't sleep. But the verb goes through quite a few substantial changes. So at the intermediate level, you're not quite ready to start using this verb mode, but you can look it up, right? So this is how you say, I can't eat it, I can't write it, I can't, any of those can't type verbs. The verb gets really long because ta would be she or he is sleeping. Kech aden kotai, I can't sleep. So it goes from ta to nkotai. So there's a few things that get turned on in there in terms of like, there's these little sections that get activated. All together, she looked in his pupil, then she said, you are so very ugly that even a frog couldn't marry you. And so we translated this from English into Tlingit. And George gave us the translation and Marge was just laughing, just really laughing. But do be careful with all this stuff. In the context of this story, it is kind of fun to learn how to say it. But if somebody heard you say this to another human being, like then like I would lose all my credentials because they'd be like, how did you teach people how to talk like this? But it does happen. Sometimes there's big, huge fights. Sometimes people have been yelling things at each other. So you might need to have this in your bucket of tools someday. And then sometimes you could tease people with stuff like this, but be careful. If other people hear you, it could, next thing you know, like you're gonna owe someone a potlatch. But if two people really know each other well, they could tease for some stuff. Okay.
Can you repeat so I know tlach, but what was the ayanach again?
Yeah, so ayanach on its own just means more than. So we have ayanach, and the opposite of that is akin. I'll put those in the chat. So this, like at the basic level, let me type this now, I'll explain. These are phrases we could use to teach simple math. Greater than, less than. Which one is more? And then we can start using it in some other concepts, right? So you could say, stronger than me, right? Or you could say, you know, so this is just like a greater than, less than. Or you say tlach ayanach before a verb, and that's really just boosting. It's like really more than it ugly, right? And so it almost sort of just develops into this sort of compounding meaning, which is just really, like if you really want to learn how to blow stuff up in terms of just saying like in English, we end up with like new words. Like it was great, it was awesome, it was superb, it was magnificent. But in Tlingit, we start putting things in front of the verb to do that same thing. So you could say Yées, kunach Yées, kach Yées, kach kunach Yées, kach ayanach Yées. And so kach ayanach Yées is almost like saying it was better than anything. Almost, it's getting into that realm. That's what the kach ayanach is doing. Who wants to read this one?
Okay, I will because I was late to class.
What is Xíxchʼ?
Idach ka kuch awach each.
Yées. Itach ka kuch awachich. Okay. Any words you recognize in there? We got the translation underneath, but just anything that you recognize? Oh, you're muted. Did we freeze? No? Okay, I'll just walk you folks through this one. So there's a bunch of little phrases that are really good to learn how to use for like storytelling. And for storytelling, it could be like, oh, you got to hear what happened to me the other day, or what I saw. And it could also be Raven was walking on the beach, or here's where our clan comes from. It could be big stories, it could be little ones. Some of them are dealing with jumps in the narrative, right? So like, and then, so like the and then one is aqa aweh. So I'll put that in the chat. So aqa aweh is just saying like, and then. And this is how you sort of do a little jump for like this thing happened, and then this thing happened, and then this thing happened. Another one is itdach, and that's what this one is. And you can say itdach or itdach aweh. And so let me, hold on, let me try and keep up with myself. And then, And then we got, and itach literally means like to follow something, right? Aawasháayi means to go after something. And itach is, and sometimes you'll say itch. So that one just, it means to follow something. So really we're saying after that. So what we're doing is, aawasháayi is kind of a time jump, like, and then this thing. Itch or itach is a sequence thing. So after she said this thing, then after that, she did this other thing. So that's what the itach does, right? Is the lake. Ka is on top of. So this story is kind of gearing us up for this next lesson, which is going to be, how do we start talking about where things are and where they're going, right? And then kuch is to return, or to sort of talk about moving behind your body, basically. But it's to return. And Aawasháayi is to throw a living creature. So, in the cultural context, this young girl has just messed up big time. So as we sort of use these stories to teach the language, we also teach the culture. You don't laugh at animals. You don't tell things that they're super ugly. And you don't throw animals, right? So she just broke these taboos, right? And so as we sort of learn more stories, a lot of times these stories signal like, here's why her life comes unglued, right? This is how things fall apart for her and for a whole bunch of other people. And so usually once we get used to like these stories, we'll just catch like, uh-oh, here comes the catastrophe that she's gonna cause. And not to like blame her or anyone, you know, whenever we look at other stories like this. Cutscene, there's this story of this little beaver. But what these stories do is we can use them to sort of say, this is why we don't do those things. Look at what happened. Look at what she caused. Look at what he caused, right? Okay. We only got a few minutes left, so let's just keep going on this story. And we'll work through this story. We'll keep moving through the beginning Tlingit workbook, and then we're going to start incorporating a few other concepts, location and direction, which this story shows us a bunch of. Can I get someone to read this one?
We tat yin Xíxchʼ ya ku'u yan has u kehu ya Yíxchʼ at wugut.
Xíxchʼ. We taught yin. Xíxchʼ ya ku'u yan has u kehu ya Yíxchʼ at wugut. So any words you recognize in there?
Taught, Xíxchʼ, Yíxchʼ. And that's it. Hooch.
Okay. So yeah, Tat is the nighttime. So Chana, this is Chana still, even if it's dark out. In my mind, when I think of like Tlingit time, Chana is just after the sun sets. Because we get Hi'ah is the dusk. Then once we get Hi'ah, then we're into Chana time. Where a long time ago, it was just generally time to wrap stuff up and start going home. And then Tat is usually when folks are sleeping, when most folks are sleeping, and when you're generally not supposed to be out doing stuff. Although, you know, do what you want. I'm just trying to give it like a perspective of how everybody's. I work in the nighttime. And then Yin is in a particular point of time, especially the nighttime. Tat Yin. It would be during the nighttime, during the night. Xíxchʼ is all. So you can say Xíxchʼ ka, all the people. Xíxchʼ everything. And so Xíxchʼ, this one is a bit tricky for some learners. So for a lot of Tlingit learners, we tend to hold on to the voiced L coming from English. So we was saying ul and la, where it should be every time we encounter that L. But once we go straight from the L to a D sound, that can be tricky for some folks. Go shta, shta, shta. So shtakat. And so you'll hear, like if you're giving a speech to people, a really nice way to start a speech is saying, shtakat yuhan, all of you, right? All of you. And then you can just move into whatever you have to say. But then, so whenever we hear shtakat in somebody's speech, we look for what comes after it. Like all the what? All the yaku'u, all the people. So ku'u is the people. It kind of depends on how it's being used, but this is a good one to know because Kwan are the ancestral people of the place. Not everybody gets to be the Kwan. You got to be born into that. You got to be, if you're Ak Kwan, that doesn't mean you live in, that's not just the people who live in Juneau. Those are the ancestral people of the Ak area, the Wushkitan and the Yachtitan. Ku'u could be Juneau Ku'u, the people who live in Juneau. It could be it's just the people, right? So this is a really good one to learn how to use. Yées Ku'u is what Walter Soboleff used to say for like the younger generation. Yées Ku'u. Here's something that pops up in front of a verb sometimes, yun. That usually means to completion. It's gotten all the way to this whatever. So in this case, wu ta would be she or he slept, but that's one person. When you have more than one, you're going to switch it to has wu cheu. Yun has wu cheu. When they had completely gone to sleep, they're totally asleep. That's what the yun part is doing here. Ya Yées Sháatkʼ, this young woman, at wugut, she went walking around. So wugut, when we put at in front of it like that, that's just going for a walk. For those of you from Yakutat, we learned a really, really cute phrase one time up there, which is tiki wak nach tu at. Let's go take a walk. But tiki wak just comes straight from English. It's just a Tlingish version of that. Tiki wak nach tu at. So cute. We got 2 minutes left. Any questions? I really like going through these stories because they just show us how the people put the language together kind of in their mind.
Any question?
Or
pertaining just to that story?
Oh, touch the cut at the dot, spot, whatever.
Okay, so I was having a conversation earlier about a killer whale fin cutting through water. Gush kena ayakakwa?
Yeah, so keet goosh, or usually you say a goosh. So a body part likes to belong to something. So keet goosh or a goosh. And then, well, there's different ways. So heen chakach would be along the surface of the water. And then there's a few different ways. There would usually be some kind of verb there. If you look at Ducklawady names, there's a whole bunch of names that have to do with like that fin moving around. If it could be sliding along the water, yen Aawasháayi, which is a cool verb because that's where shita comes from, like a knife. That's also ya anashitoa du yagu. So someone's boat can be really flying along. And that also works for that. So yeah, that's one way.
I saw it on one of the things about personal names that Sháatkʼ wrote in regards to Gushena, and like Xeina, how he wrote it.
Huh.
And I asked the elders about it earlier, and they weren't too sure about that word exactly. That's why I figured maybe there's something else, like maybe I'm not saying it right.
I can look, and it might be Xíxchʼ, because the water does have, when you talk about the mouth of the water, it's the surface, right? And it's really cool because Xíxchʼ comes from like being on the mouth of it. Xáyach is right at the edge of the mouth. And so even though we say mouth, it also means entrance. And so when it comes to bodies of, we're water people, we're people right on the ocean.
Right.
Even Tlingit, the ocean's still embedded in the language. And so we've got a bunch of ways to talk about being in the water or near the water, through the water. So it's really like fun to see how complex it gets with that.
Cheese. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Email. Okay.
Oh, Chance.
That's a Tlingit Hinach. That sounds familiar. Because I always seem to come across a word. I'm like, that sounds really familiar. Like, I should know this word. Like, I've seen it somewhere before, or a part of it. So how do I just say that sounds familiar? Just give me a second and I'll remember.
I guess I would probably say Xíxchʼ, which would be a little long, but it sounds like something I know.
Yeah.
That's something, and so I'll put that in the chat.
I had a question about you were mentioning like Kwans and people being from and doing introductions, and a lot of times a lot of us who live in different places or and our families come from different places. Like my cousin and I always felt uncomfortable saying Tlakwan Kwan Dach Xíxchʼ because we've never lived in Tlakwan, but that's our clan house, that's where our grandparents came from, and that's where our heritage, our lineage traces back to. So to clarify that, could you say, or would this be insulting to say Tlakwan Kwan Ahunk Iyan Dach? My family comes from there, because it's hard to say, because people always say, like I'm from Tlakwan, or I'm from Huna, or I'm from Angoon, even though we've never lived there, that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we're gonna brush up against some colonial ideas, I think. So the colonial idea is like, you're not from here, bro. You never lived here, right? But I don't think that's how we thought of it long time ago. The way it was explained to me is your name comes from a house. That house is in a Kwan. That's where you are from. And so for us, like you could be born in San Francisco and you could be raised in Las Vegas, but you have a lineage to a specific place. And that's where the Kwan is, like the people of the land. And for me, I'm not a fan of separating that, even if you feel uncomfortable. And so there are ways you could do that. Like, for example, you could say, so we tie ourselves to places through the language. So we are Chilkat Kwan, we're the Xíxchʼ Kwan. Then you could say Kwan has to ani kat, has to ani ka ke khat uwa what. But I grew up in the land of the Kwan people. And so there are ways you can sort of, and that's how we usually start doing that, because like where you're born and things aren't like they used to be. So I'm always just cautious and just say, let's try and be forgiving and loving and kind people with each other, because sometimes we're going to encounter someone who, I was adopted, I've seen all kinds of stuff. Someone says, well, if my parent was such a leader, how come I don't know anything? And they're crying and it's sensitive. And so the thing that I like to say is like, and Walter Soboleff used to talk about this too. It's like people who know who they are, they don't harm themselves. And this is where it comes into like Xíxchʼ hausati. We become true Tlingit people. And part of that is reclaiming that identity and living with that identity. And it does, it takes sometimes some just being more understanding people, just being, at the roots, I believe we're kind people and we're respectful people because they talk about that stuff all the time. The Tlingit talks sometimes about how mean we are and how tough we are, but that's because they're just trying to take everything. But at that core, like Cyril George would talk about that too. He'd tell a story about these people, their village got raided and people were coming to take slaves, which happened back in the day. And everybody was just scrambling to get out of there. And this guy, he got away and he was safe. He was in hiding, but then he heard the cries of his son. So he ran down there to be taken slave so he could stay with his child. And so these are the things that I hold on to in terms of teaching this stuff and this content. And these are discussions that should be had within clans. I'm not gonna tell anybody what to do, but I recommend clans just gobble your people up, take them, scoop them up in your arms and just love them up and just.
Xíxchʼ.
Okay, Xíxchʼ, Johan.
All right.
We'll keep the conversations going. We'll see you on Thursday.
Tuyir kwasatino kuni.
Xíxchʼ.
Oh, she left. Darn. I was gonna try to talk to Jinkasi for a minute.
Oh, okay.
Willard, huh?
Oh,
yeah, okay. I always was gonna tell her Jilkat dak ayakhat. I always Jilkat kwan dak ayakhat, something I always said. But I also grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area.
You can always go home, man.
This is the home. Yep. This is always can go home.
Yep. Okay.
Sometime when you got a moment, if we can meet up, I got to tell you a story about those reel-to-reels and the Agnes Bellinger reel-to-reels, all 30 of them. I want to talk to you about that.
Okay. Text me. Let's
Text me.
we'll hook up. Okay.
All right.